So you've been past the test of reverential quiet during this period of technology, and we appreciate that. We all love to look at those screens while the bubble is going around. Mentioned that as part of the collaborative enterprise that there is a need to find the right allies. And I suspect all of you are aware of the increasing threat of cybersecurity. I'm sure that it affects each of your industries. We work in the healthcare industry, and the fact is that healthcare data has significant value on the dark web, and the consequence of it is that it is a target on an increasing basis, and in fact, a remarkably increasing basis. Hospital systems have been subject to ransomware attacks, and I think they've been public and everyone quite aware of them. But one of the things that's been interesting is that initially the service providers got together and began to talk collaboratively about ways that they might mitigate this problem. But they became to understand as they began to progress with this discussion that it was not just the providers, but it was the payers, it was the medical products, it was the technologists that surrounded it, and it was also human factors that were involved in the deployment of adequate systems, and sometimes their inability to do it, but their inability to confess that they had been unable to install certain softwares. And so they began to look at this from a much more social dynamic and from the physical and technology proponent. As they have gathered together in a collaboration that's beginning to make progress, not only in the protection of these records, but in their ability to understand collectively, despite the fact that they compete for patients, the notion that they can improve the system dramatically with this effort. Now, we're pleased to be able to welcome with us here today Davis Smith, who is the founder and the CEO of Cotopaxi. This is a remarkable place, and any company that has as its tagline, "Make great gear and help alleviate poverty," is worth recognizing. Now, Davis is a serial entrepreneur. He's had experience globally, and particularly in Latin and South America, where he had a startup in Brazil that was a remarkable startup and in fact won awards as the #1 startup and company there. He is presently providing help to the poor and is really literally on a mission to help those who have needs. And if you're looking for employment, I might point out to you that Cotopaxi was rated by the Deseret News to be the #1 place to work in Utah. And there are applications in the back. Welcome here, Davis Smith. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate it. Well, it's great to be here. This morning in speaking with Senator Lee, we were talking about the importance of collaboration. And talking about the reality is that sometimes collaboration, despite the best intentions, fails. Collaboration can be hard sometimes. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about compassionate collaboration and how that can help ensure that we have better outcomes. And when I think of collaboration that's failed, I think of an experience that I had 2 years ago where I actually was preparing to do one of the most challenging physical and mental and emotional activities I've ever done, which was I was preparing to cross from Cuba to Florida in a kayak. And this had never been done before, and I decided that it was something that I wanted to do. And so I spent the better part of a year preparing and training with my paddling partner, my cousin. And we would spend, oftentimes we'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and go paddle until it was time to go to work. Or on Saturdays, we'd wake up at 3 in the morning and go paddle until nightfall, or sometimes even paddle from Friday all through the night into the Saturday at nightfall to better understand what it felt like to paddle without rest and with very little food. The crossing from Cuba to Florida was 124 miles, and it's a 35-hour paddle nonstop. So there's no resting or sleeping. You eat while you're paddling because there's a current that's pushing up through the Atlantic, through the Florida Strait, and if you stop paddling, you end up missing Florida, which you don't want to do. And so it ended up being just a really amazing experience where we'd put all this time into it, but as we got to Cuba and we started preparing for this, we made one critical error. And that was that in our confidence, we decided that we didn't want the help of our support boat. And so my cousin and I made a commitment to each other that we didn't want to touch the support boat. We weren't going to use it. We were going to do this completely unassisted. And so the first 12 hours or so of this paddle were perfect. It was these turquoise blue Caribbean waters. We literally saw turtles and dolphins and all these amazing fish swimming beneath us. But as night fell, everything changed. And the sun set, there was no moon, and pretty soon we saw lightning striking all around us. And huge waves started rolling in, and the captain of the support boat yelled out to us and the other paddling group that we had a few other kayaks with us of other entrepreneurs. He called out to everyone and said, "I need everyone to come as close to the support boat as possible because I can't see you. In these waves, I don't know if any of you are still here or if you're like separated from us, and if you get separated, it's over. We will never find you." So we all got as close as possible to this support boat. But during the chaos of the storm, our kayak ended up getting squeezed in between another kayak and the support boat. And a huge wave came and slammed our kayak against the side of the support boat. What we should have done, what we instinctively wanted to do, was take our hands and violently push away from the support boat so that we could get some distance and paddle away from it. But instead, we did nothing because we'd committed to each other to not touch the support boat. So the next big wave came and slammed us against the support boat again. At the same time, it was coming down from a massive wave. And it fell on top of the kayak, and our kayak rolled. We were attached to the kayaks through spray skirts. The first thing we did was grab some of the gear so that it wouldn't sink or float away. Then we needed to breathe, so we ripped off our spray skirts and popped our heads out of the water. And as we did, we heard everyone yelling, "Cut the engines, cut the engines." They were worried that the boat was going to run over us and chop us up. We ended up popping out the back, and we spent the next 2 hours trying to salvage our damaged kayak. And ultimately, the kayak ended up breaking in half and sinking to the bottom of the ocean. It was one of the most discouraging and disappointing moments I'd ever gone through. I know that sounds trivial, but it was something that we'd emotionally prepared for so long. And fortunately, our support boat had an extra kayak that we were able to get in and complete the journey. But we compromised our safety and the main objective by being distracted by something that was completely unimportant. And so our collaboration, it ended up failing. So again, what I want to talk about is how we can use compassion to help have better outcomes and to collaborate better with each other. When I was 4 years old, my family moved to the developing world. My dad was an adventurer, so we spent a lot of our time doing crazy things. We'd make our own raft and float down the Amazon River fishing for piranha, or we'd go and survive on uninhabited islands, spearing fish to survive with spears that we'd made ourselves. So I grew up loving the outdoors. But more importantly, I developed a deep sense of empathy for others. And I remember one of my very first memories as a child, as a 4-year-old, was seeing other children my age, 3 or 4 years old, that were standing on the sides of the street completely naked. You can't have that type of experience, especially as a child, and not have it shape who you are. So from the time I was young, I knew that I wanted to find a way to give back, to help others. I knew that I was no more deserving than these other kids. I wasn't smarter than them. I just got lucky. And so I started a life mission where I started looking for ways that I could make my life meaningful in some way. I ended up going to Brigham Young University. When I was there, right when I was starting school, I read a local newspaper that told a story about a man named Steve Gibson. This man was a successful entrepreneur, and he actually sold his business, and he was probably in his young 60s, is my guess, and he and his wife ended up moving to the Philippines. They'd never lived outside the United States. They didn't speak a foreign language, but they decided that they could go there and they could help teach poor Filipinos how to be self-sufficient and how to start their own businesses. And so they got a large mansion, they got this colonial mansion, and they started housing 25 people at a time. And they went and lived in a small little apartment nearby. And over a 2-month period, they teach these young Filipinos how to start their own businesses. And then they graduate and they bring in a new cohort. And this story was so inspiring to me that I ended up cutting it out and I put it in the front cover of my binder at school. And I carried it around school for 3.5 years. And I looked at it every single day. I probably saw it 15 or 20 times a day. But it was there to remind me what was truly important. It was about finding a way that I could discover what my own talents were and use those to help others. And so towards the end of my time at BYU, I heard about a social impact conference. So I went back on campus on a Saturday, and I was going to some different sessions. And in between some sessions, I was walking down the hallway, and I saw Steve Gibson, this man that I idolized. He was getting into an elevator. So I ran down the hallway, I stuck my arm in the elevator so it couldn't close, and I jumped inside, and he couldn't escape. He had to talk to me. And, keep in mind that Steve Gibson, he's this multimillionaire. He's changed thousands of people's lives, and I'm a nobody. And he was acting so flattered that I recognized him. And just the most humble guy. And he asked if I'd be interested in meeting him in his office in a couple weeks, so I set up the appointment, and I spent 2 weeks preparing a pitch where I wanted to convince him to let me go work for him. And I wanted to help him expand his program from the Philippines to Latin America, where I'd grown up. And the whole time he was kind of nodding approvingly, and I kind of thought, yes, I've got this. And at the very end, he just tells me, Davis, I love how passionate you are about this, but you don't want to come work for me. He's like, what I see in you is that you should become an entrepreneur. And then 10 or 20 years down the road, you can go find your own way of making an impact. And so that's when I began. I just made the decision there that I was going to become an entrepreneur. A few months later, I started my first business. I ran that for about 6 years and was lucky that it was successful. I sold it. Then I went to business school. I went to the Wharton School, where when I graduated, I moved down to Brazil, and I started another company. After doing that for about 3.5 years, I decided that I was ready for a change. I was having an amazing time. I built a company that was named Brazil Startup of the Year in 2012. My 2 daughters were speaking and learning Portuguese. In a lot of ways, it was this dream come true. But I knew I needed to leave. And no one quite understood why, but it came back to this mission that I felt I had to work towards, this idea of giving back. And so I decided to move back to the United States. And I started working on a business. That's the one thing I knew how to do. I believed that I could make a difference by building a business that could have a bigger impact than I could on my own. But I needed to build a business that had core values that could inspire the world. And so I named the business Cotopaxi after a volcano in Ecuador, which is one of the countries I grew up in, and decided to build the social mission, compassion, into everything that we do as a brand. And we launched 3 years ago. It's been an amazing and wild ride for us. We've raised a little over $20 million in venture capital from Silicon Valley and New York, some of the best-known venture capitalists in the world that believe in our mission of helping eradicate extreme poverty in our lifetimes and using business to do it. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're doing that. And so I'm going to play a couple videos here, assuming these work, that kind of show a little bit about how we collaborate and how this collaboration with compassion has been able to help build our business. That was a worm. So one of the things that we did on the day of our launch, instead of just selling product, we decided that we wanted to involve the community. We wanted them to go live the brand and core values of the brand. And so we created an event called the Questival. It's a 24-hour adventure race. You form a team, and you go spend those 24 hours adventuring in the outdoors, giving back, and serving in the community, and you get points for doing this. Every racer gets one of our backpacks, and then we give away trips and gear to the winning teams. The day that we launched our website, we held this first Questival, and I realized we had something special when I showed up to the event and I saw this huge line of people that were there to go check in, and people were wearing Cotopaxi shirts and hats. The only thing is that we had never sold a shirt or hat. They had made their own homemade Cotopaxi gear. There was a Jeep that we saw that had our llama from our logo spray painted on its hood, on the back, and on the doors. And I just thought, I wouldn't even do this to my own car. This is insane. Like, who does this? And we started seeing that we were connecting with the community. We were collaborating with the community. We were helping build a movement around this idea of business doing good, about business looking beyond their bottom line to make an impact on people. And some of the ways we've done that is, of course, through the Questival events, where we have thousands of hours of community service done. We'll have thousands of dollars donated to local and national nonprofits around the world through the racers. But we've also built it into the business in other ways. If you order something from our website, you'll actually get a handwritten thank you card that's written by a refugee that's been resettled here in Salt Lake City. So we have a number of programs that support these newly arrived refugees. These are typically refugees that have arrived in the last 6 months or less. A lot of them are learning English still. And we give them opportunity to write these thank you cards. They'll write it in their native tongue. They'll write "do good" and "adventure on," and then they sign their name, they sign what country they came from, and what language they wrote it in. And it gives them an opportunity to make supplemental income for their families as they're getting resettled here. And we also teach basic job skills: how to do a job interview, how to follow up after a job interview, how to create a resume. All these basic job skills. We'll teach them about leadership or budgeting. So it's been a really meaningful experience. There's two siblings that I met in this card writing program that really have shaped me. One of the girls' names is Jolly, and her brother Fiston were both part of this card writing program. They were in their late teens, and as I started to get to know them, I was talking to them afterwards, and I was asking them about their family. I asked them about their parents and where they worked, and they told me that they didn't have parents. And I didn't quite understand. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we were in the Congo when we were young, and our parents were killed in the war. Fiston was 13 years old, and there are 6 siblings in the family. The youngest was 4. And Fiston, as a 13-year-old, led his siblings out of the Congo. They walked from Congo to Uganda. They survived by drinking water out of rivers, by eating anything they could find. And they lived in a refugee camp in Uganda for 5 years before being fortunately resettled. And they were sent here to Utah, and they live here as a small little family. And it's been just an inspiration to see them. Jolly just graduated from high school and a few months ago, and she got a full scholarship to study at the University of Utah. And she wants to become a doctor. So this has been a true blessing for me to be able to interact with these amazing refugees. These are the kind of people that we want in our communities. And this is a true collaboration between a company and the private sector looking for ways that it can impact people for good. And at the same time, it reinforces our mission of doing good and gets people to feel brand loyalty to us, that they want to continue to support us. Another example of how our business collaborates is we actually work closely with our factories, and we find ways that we can collaborate with them to make unique products. And so I'm going to share this quick video about one of our hero products. It's a really unique product because we actually involve the sewers in our factory to make decisions and choices around it.
If there's one collection that really encompasses Cotopaxi and its Gear for Good philosophy, it's the Del Dia collection. It all started with us not wanting to create more waste. It developed into also empowering the employees at the factory to be more creative themselves. From the ground up, each Del Dia product is one of a kind and handcrafted by different individuals throughout the production process. It starts with somebody going into the warehouse and handpicking the fabrics. Then it goes to the pattern makers and the screen printers, and then to the sewers who select the materials they want to use. And it's all of these creative steps that come together to create a one-of-a-kind Del Dia product.
Asan yung bag ko maganda?
So, anong kulay ang pinaka-gusto mo dyan?
Gusto ko yung red, kasi sign ng love yun. Yung mga Pilipino kasi mapagmahal masyado yan eh.
Gusto ko mga dark color eh. Parang masayang tingnan ba? Nakakaalis ng stress, nakakaalis ng pagod. Pag nakita mo talaga yung bag, pag yung mga dark color na ganun, napapatawa ka na. Talaga napapa-smile ka na.
I've been on the production floor and I've seen this process come together. It's something our factory in the Philippines is really proud of. Our goal with the Del Dia collection is to connect you with the creators of these products, to get you outside, to help you do good, and to inspire others to do the same.
So again, we're basically using the sewers in the factory. These are sewers who have been working in the factory on average for 11.5 years. They're incredible artisans and craftsmen, but they've never had a voice in the creative process. They're simply told what to sew, and that's what they sew. And we wanted to change that. So we used these leftover materials from the factory, and we empowered them to make decisions. As you saw, the only rule is to make no bag alike. And so every one of those bags is unique, they're funky, they're fun, and they represent, of course customers love them because they represent one. It's one of one. It's a bag that only you on the entire planet has. At the end of this, as you guys are exiting, we actually have some cards where our store is actually just kitty corner from here on the corner of 100 South and Main. You can see the store there. We have the llama on some awnings. But if you go over there, there's a card and you can go in. With any purchase, you can go get a free Luzon Del Dia. It's a $50 bag. If you're looking for a gift for somebody or for yourself, you might want to swing over there and check it out. You can hear more about the story there as well. Another way that we're working to have impact is not just we use our profits to support poverty alleviation. We do grant giving to nonprofits around the world, but we also work closely with some communities where we want to help. And not just by giving handouts, but by figuring out ways to empower them and to create livelihoods and sustainability. So here's a quick example of a place that's really important to me. This is in Bolivia. This is one of the countries I used to live in, and a place that I really love. And this is a community that we work with that makes about $200 a year. So you can imagine what kind of life that is. They live in extreme poverty. And a lot of times their children are leaving to go work in mines or do other things to go make income for their families. And so we're doing some work that really helps support a way of life. And so here's a quick video. The very beginning of it is in Spanish. I know that some of the subtitles are probably hard for you to read out there. So if you understand Spanish, great. If not, bear with me for a few seconds and it'll switch over to English.
Es de bastante importancia la llama. Con eso compramos mercaderías, alimentación y educación para los hijos. O sea, aquí vivimos desde los abuelos que han vivido hace más de 500 años, debe ser, los abuelos que han vivido. Y siempre no nos vamos a olvidar nuestro campo, donde los abuelos, papás han vivido. Siempre van a estar generación en generación. Yo sé que a un tiempo mis hijos también estarán aquí.
Growing up in South America, I saw llama wool and llama fiber being used constantly, and it was the fiber they used for thousands of years. So it's been interesting to see how underdeveloped this industry is, despite having been around for so long. And we're just barely kind of tapping the surface about how we can have the greatest impact on the livelihoods and lives of these individuals living in the Andes.
Well, I love the Coosa jacket because it is a story that keeps on giving. And so it has this traditional exterior, but technical fabrics, amazing colors. And instead of just putting a polyester or down insulation in it, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to see what other natural fibers are out there. I knew it worked technically, but now to see how it can work with building and preserving communities completely changed me as a designer and how I want to design future products.
I think one of the most powerful parts of the Cotopaxi brand is this connection of product to people. And one thing that we're hoping to accomplish is to allow people, as they're wearing one of our products, to actually feel a connection with an individual that lives in Bolivia. So this is just a really beautiful part of the world. This is a community I used to live in and love, and to be able to see the impact that we can have has been tremendous. So we make llama sweaters, we make jackets where the insulation inside the jacket is llama wool instead of down. Llama wool is pretty magical, actually. It insulates when it's wet. The hair is actually hollow, so it's very lightweight and breathable. It also is hypoallergenic, and it actually doesn't retain odor. So when we launched our llama sweater campaign, we actually had a couple ambassadors of ours traveling around the world, climbing mountains, going to Antarctica, wearing the sweater every single day for 61 straight days. And it doesn't retain odor. I didn't actually smell them myself, but I've been told that they don't retain odor. And it's just a really cool story. The 61 days is tied to our what we call the human lifespan warranty. We have a warranty that is just, instead of just calling it a lifetime guarantee, we call it the human lifespan warranty, 61 years, and it's to the average lifespan of someone that lives in the underdeveloped world. So if you live in the underdeveloped world, you live almost 20 years less than someone in the developed world. And that's just unacceptable. We need to do something about that. So, one of the most meaningful experiences I've had collaborating in the private sector in the last few years has been working with the United Nations Foundation. I'm on a council called the Global Entrepreneurs Council. There's 8 members on this council, someone representing different parts of the world, from Latin America to Asia to Europe to Africa. So we have all of these amazing entrepreneurs that are committed to doing good. There's 8 of us on this council. And we decided that we wanted to focus our work over our 2-year appointment working with refugees. And so we've had the opportunity to work with refugees across the globe. But one of the most meaningful experiences I had was actually working with refugees in the Middle East. And this is actually a picture taken in Jordan, right on the border of Syria, at a refugee camp called Zaatari. And Zaatari is the 4th largest city in Jordan. There's around 81,000 refugees that live in this city. These are people that arrived with absolutely nothing. They lost everything they owned, including oftentimes their loved ones, and they came here to start a new life. And it was so inspiring for me to see these people starting this new life. There was a street that they called the Champs-Élysées, and it was 1,300 small businesses, women cooking meals. There were some women making wedding dresses. There was a man that made furniture out of scrap pieces of wood. And you truly saw this unconquerable human spirit. But my most incredible memory there was actually that evening as we were wrapping up the day. We went up to a hill that kind of overlooked the rest of the refugee camp. And I obviously looked very different, especially to the kids. You know, I'm really bald and really white and, tall. So they were very curious, and they'd come up and stare at me, and instinctively one of these little boys grabbed my hands and started walking up my legs and up my body, and then did a flip. And he took off his sandals as he did this, which I just thought was so respectful. And pretty soon all the other little kids ran up and they started doing this line where every one of them was walking up my body and taking off their shoes and doing this flip. And pretty soon I had these dusty footprints all the way up my body. But it was one of the most beautiful moments, because for a few minutes we forgot that we were in a refugee camp. The average refugee lives in a camp for 17 years. These children have basically been sentenced to living in a camp their entire childhoods. So that night I went home, and my heart was heavy thinking about these children. I have children around this age myself. I have 3 kids. And just thinking about these kids, I was having a difficult time, and I turned on the TV in my hotel room in Amman. And as I'm watching the news, I see an image that many of you probably saw as well. This is Amran. a young boy who was bombed in Aleppo and pulled out of the rubble. And as I watched this image, it completely broke me inside. Children just like him, just earlier that day, who had escaped Syria, were spending time with me. But there were so many children back in Syria that weren't so lucky. And it really hit home the urgency of the work that we have to do. So my question for each of you is, how are you making a difference? How are you injecting compassion into the collaborations that you have with people in your daily life? We have a responsibility in this room, everyone here, to look beyond ourselves, to look for ways that we can help others. Thank you.